welcome. I'm Margie Remmers-Davis with Fast and Easy QBO, creator of the Fast and Easy Way to QuickBooks Online Pro Advisor certification. And this is a live stream that we do inside our Facebook group, which is the QBO Gym Locker Room. You can see what it looks like right there. This is just a little bit of a different view because I'm an administrator, so it looks a little bit different. But you'll notice that inside the QBO gym, you have access to nearly 100 free exercises to get hands-on practice using QuickBooks Online. You can follow along in our weekly live streams, which is what we are here in, and you can vote on where you need more practice. So if you are watching this live, then welcome. You're already here in the Facebook group, in the live stream. If you're watching the recording and you would like access to the close to 100 exercises for free. If you'd like to join us for live, then you can, the link is below. If you are inside the locker room, then you have access to this spreadsheet, which is, you can see all of the different exercises. These are our, let me just move this just a smidge. You can see down at the bottom, there's different tabs. So we've got some getting started. These are super, super basic if you don't have any experience at all. The advanced ones all come from our basic level certification course. The advanced come from our advanced level certification course. The Pro Advisor challenges come from inside your QBOA account, and we just reformat them into our signature exercise format, which you'll see in a minute. And then in this retired miscellaneous special request, so here we have people who have requested exercises. You'll notice they all say Margie create because they are on my to-do list. But if you scroll down to the bottom, these are ones that are retired. That means that they were required for previous versions of the test, but they are no longer required, but they're still out there so you can still practice. Today, we're going to be going over an exercise from our newest product, which isn't even published or anything yet. If you're watching the recording, then maybe it will be, but as of this moment, we only have a special group of people who have access to it, and that is called the QBO Gym. So the QBO Gym is a monthly subscription where you can get access to tons more exercises and actually simulate life as a bookkeeper. So when you're in the QBO Gym, you have 4 different categories. We've got this whole gym theme going on because we're all exercising, right? So we have warm-ups, cardio, strength training, and cool down exercises. So as you sit down, you can actually go through all these exercises and learn how to be a bookkeeper. So the first exercise that we're going to cover today, it actually comes from our cardio section of the February issue of the QBO Gym. So the way that the gym works is there's a little video animation thing, then there's a little quiz, which you're not going to see right now because this is a temporary thing. And then here are all of the different exercises. And today we're going to go over this one right here, which is sending Craig's invoices this month. Okay, so, and we're not going to be going over all of the pieces of this exercise. We're just going to focus on this little section, video games by Dan. Okay, so let me read the scenario part. Okay, so let me go back to our scenario, and I'm going to read this whole thing. This is the exercise, and this is covered in the little animation. But it says, Craig has asked you to send out the invoice for Bill's Windsurf Shop. He gets monthly pest control and weekly gardening. Since it's the same every time, you decide to go ahead and set this up as a recurring invoice. Okay, so that's going to be this whole section right here, Bill's Windsurf Shop. Um, let's see. Craig also asked you to send out the invoice for video games by Dan. Craig has previously recorded some work for Dan, but he hadn't invoiced it yet, and he'd like you to do so now. Okay, so that's what we're going to cover, just this section right here, video games by Dan. And the reason that we are going to cover it is because in today's live stream, we are going to go over all of the pop-up stuff. So I had a number of people who are our beta testers in the gym who said, hey, I'm following these instructions and they popped up. The previous charges popped up. Where did they come from? We're going to talk all things pop up in today's live stream. Okay. So let's hop over to Video Games by Dan and remind us, it says, next we'll send the Video Games by Dan invoice. Craig said that he previously recorded some work for Dan, but he hadn't invoiced it yet, and he'd like you to do so. Let's see how to do that. Okay, so we're going to be in our sample company. So here I am in the sample company. If you're in our group and watching it live, you should know how to get into the sample company. If you are watching the recording, then you may need instructions for getting your QBO account and accessing the sample company, which is kind of our sandbox that we play around. And of course, all that information is in the link below. So here we are in our sample company. Okay, and we're going to click plus new and select invoice. Okay, plus new, select invoice. And while that's loading, we're going to go on to steps 2 and 3. In the customer field, enter video games by Dan. Okay, so here we are in our customer field. We're entering video games by Dan. Okay, and you'll notice that when I do that, these charges pop up. And this is what we're covering. We're covering like this whole drawer. Where did this come from? Why did it pop up? And the reason is because Craig had previously used a transaction called a delayed charge. So he had gone in and he had already entered that he did this much installation of landscape design, that he already had this weekly gardening service on. Okay, so he had already done that. I'm going to leave the exercise for just a minute and talk about where this come from. So this is Video Games by Dan. Let's say that Craig does some more work for Dan before we send out this invoice. You'll see how that pops up. So I'm going to click this X. I'm going to leave without saving. And I'm going to go to the plus new button. Okay, and when I hit the plus new button, you'll notice that there is something here called a delayed charge. Okay, so I put in the delayed charge. This is a non-posting transaction. It just kind of puts it in this holding area. I'm going to say the customer is Video Games by Dan. Okay. And the weekly gardening service was already in there. Let's not use that. Let's just say, what should we have him do? Let's just have him do some custom design work. Okay, so now I'm going to, and actually just so you can see it, I'm going to say added by Margie. So you know for sure, it's like I'm doing a magic trick, right? So that you know for sure that this is the one that was me. Okay, so now I'm going to hit save and close. And let's go back to our exercise. So here I am sending invoices. I'm going to go back to step 1 and start over. I'm going to click plus new and select invoice. Okay, plus new, select invoice. I'm glad to see that so many of you have popped on. We had so many technical difficulties today, and we just kept having to delay and delay. And yet there are some of you who stuck with me and are here live. So I'm just so excited to have you. All right. So in the customer field now, I'm going to say Video Games by Dan. And as soon as I do that, again, here are all of the charges that popped up. And here's the one. This is me, added by Margie. Okay. So going back to our exercise, okay, step 1 or steps 2, in the customer field, enter video games by Dan. You'll notice that it pops up, right? We're going to click add all to add these to, add these to the, and what did I just do? Oh my gosh, guys, this is not my day, is it? All right, we're going to click add all to add these to the invoice. Okay, so I'm going to click add all, boom. And then that's it. Okay, step 4, we're going to click save and close. All right, obviously, if this were real life, we would send it to Dan, but we're not going to. Okay, so delayed charges is one of the ways that things end up in that pop-up drawer. There's a number of other ways, and one of them is called a billable expense. A billable expense means that I, Craig, paid for something, which then I'm going to now bill somebody else for it. Okay. I'm going to add that to an invoice. So I'm going to buy something on behalf of Amy's Bird Sanctuary, and then I'm going to charge her for it. Now, this is covered in the advanced course, but and in the advanced course, we've got billable expenses with and without markup. We're just going to do just one of the exercises about this. Okay. All right. So in our advanced course, we have invoicing a billable expense. So let's see how this works. So Kate, here's our scenario. Kate has contracted with Craig's Landscaping Services to do some work in her yard. She decides she wants a rock fountain, and so Craig offers to get her one at a discount from Tim Phillip Masonry. Later, he will just add this to Kate's invoice. So that piece of adding it to Kate's invoice, we purchased it first, and then we're going to add it. That's what's going to show up in the pop-up drawer. Okay, so step 1, first we're going to create the expense. So we bought it from Tim Phillip. Okay, so we're going to go to, let's see, we did this one already. All right, so we're going to go to, we're going to create an expense. Okay, +1 expense. We're going to say that it's Tim Phillip Masonry. Oh, Tim popped up with a purchase order. You'll notice that a purchase order was created previously and pops up in the drawer. Okay, so this is another thing that can pop up in the drawers. If I had created a purchase order, and I was going to go over this earlier, I was going to go over this later, but I will go over it right now, is that a purchase order, it's not a posting transaction. A purchase order just means that I have agreed with the vendor that I'm going to purchase this thing. And so the purchase order is already out there. It's kind of floating. It's kind of in that holding area. And then I'm going to want to add it to my expense. Okay. So I'd already talked to Tim Phillip. I already agreed on this. So I'm going to click add. Okay. Now, so I've done that step. Now we're going to go to steps 2 and 3. And here is the important part, okay, is that I'm going to mark the item billable. That means I'm going to now charge this person for it. And who am I going to charge? I'm going to charge Kate Whelan. Okay, so I'm going to put in where to go down here. I'm going to say that it's billable. So I just check this box. And who is it billable to? It's going to be billable to Kate Whelan. Now, these fields are only available because I have it set up to be showing on in account and services. And that's going to be our next thing right here. Note, in a real life scenario, you would need to make sure that expenses are billable. So if you're not seeing that column that says billable and you're not seeing that column that says customer, that means you haven't set this up in accountant settings. Okay, so this is done in accountant settings on the expenses tab under make expenses billable. Okay, but in the sample company, we didn't have to turn that on. It was already on. Okay, so steps 4 and 5. Next, we're going to create the invoice for Kate Whelan. Okay, so let me wrap up this one, save and close. So now when I create the invoice for Kate Whelan, I type in Kate's name here. Boom. There is the expense that I just created. And so now I can add that. So that billable expenses is another type of thing that pops up in the drawer. The third type of, or a third thing that can pop up in the drawer, I guess 4 if we count that purchase order that I wasn't planning on covering yet, is a time charge. Okay, so let's take a look at time charges. And I don't actually have an exercise for this one. I'm going to go ahead and hit save and close for Kate here. Okay, but we do have inside of already in the sample company, if I open up an invoice and type in Amy's Bird Sanctuary, okay, you'll notice again in the drawer, what pops up is billable time. Okay, so how did billable time get added to, again, it's in that kind of holding area waiting to be added to the invoice. How did it get there? It got there because one of the employees added a time charge that was billable. So I'm going to hit to exit without saving. Okay, and if I hit plus new, again, I don't have an exercise for this, but as I was preparing for today, I thought that I had more exercises about these pop-ups, and I'm realizing that that there are so many more I could create. So do you remember that list of Margie's to do, like to create? It just keeps growing. All right, Aina, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce her name, but thank you. I'm glad you are enjoying it. All right. So, so here we are. We have single time activity and we have weekly timesheet. So let's take a look at a single time activity. So here is a single time activity. If you were with us last week, when we covered projects, we went over these time activities, right? And this is very, very similar, only now we're going to mark that it is billable. Okay, so here's my employee, Emily. We can say Amy's Bird Sanctuary. We can say that she worked on, I don't know, I love to put custom design. Okay, and this time we're going to make it billable. And here is Emily's billable rate. Now, last week when we talked about projects, we talked about Emily's cost rate. Cost rate and billable rate are two different things. Billable rate is the rate that we charge other people for Emily's time. The cost rate is how much Emily costs us. Okay, so that's going to include how much we pay her, how much it costs us for her equipment, how much we have to pay for the roof over her head, those kinds of things. So that's her cost rate, which is different again from how much she's actually getting paid. Okay. All right, so John says he missed last week. That's fine. The recording is in the group, and it's also on YouTube where we talked about that. All right, so so this is the billable, her billable rate, and we can just say it was 5 hours. Okay, so now 5 hours is $75 per hour, is $375 that we're going to add to Emily's bill. Or not Emily's bill, Amy's bill. Okay, so here, or Amy's invoice. So here is the customer. It's billable to Amy. So I'm going to hit save and close. And now let's add an invoice for Amy again. Okay, so Amy. Okay, and here's the billable time from before. And here is the billable time from today. I should have put added by Margie so that you would know it was me, but this is today's date. So if you're watching the recording, you just have to trust me that today is February 24th. All right, so that is how billable time. So far we've covered delayed charges. So Craig can go in and he say, I did this thing. It goes out into the, here, let me make myself bigger here. There we go. All right. So far we've covered three things. We've covered the delayed charges. So Craig can go out and he can, say that I did this, and this, and it just is in this holding area until we create the invoice. Those of you, by the way, who are studying for the test and you know about recurring invoices, you can also add that billable stuff on those delayed charges onto invoice or onto recurring invoices. So that's kind of cool. So we've got delayed charges that pop up. We also have billable expenses. So I bought a thing and then now I'm charging it back to so-and-so. That's going to pop up. And we've covered time expenses. There's weekly and there's single time activity. Both of them work the same way. You check the box and say that it's billable. And if it's billable, then that means it's in that holding area so that when you go to create an invoice for that person, it's going to show up. Okay. So the next one that we're going to talk about is, let's see, this is the one we just did, billable expenses. We're going to create an invoice from an estimate. Okay. Now I asked you in the group to do this exercise, to create the estimate first before you came today. But I had so many difficulties that I didn't do it. So we're going to do it together, even though I said we weren't going to do it together. Okay. So we have to first create the invoice. So we're going to create an invoice real quick. Gavelberg Photography is considering installing an outdoor background for their photography sessions. They would like an estimate for 10 hours of design work plus one rock fountain, one pump, and installation, which you anticipate will take about 3 hours. How would you set this up? Okay, so we're going to click plus new and select an estimate. And actually, so let's see, here is my finishing up with Amy there, save and close. Those of you who are in the gym have a similar exercise about estimates, and I redid it because the QBO has changed their interface a little bit. So we're going to maybe do this slightly different than what the current exercise says. Okay, so here we are, plus new and then estimate. Is that what I did? Yep. Okay. And then, okay, we're going to complete the estimate using the information from the scenario. Okay, so I've got Gavelberg Photography. If you guys did this beforehand like you were supposed to, yay! I'm sorry that I'm having to take up time to do it. But, technical difficulties. Okay, so we've got 10 hours of design work and one rock fountain. Design. Oops. Oh my gosh, you guys. Design. 10 hours of design work. And a rock fountain. And I'm guessing I probably need a pump. Usually do for these things. And I probably need some installation. Installation. Okay. Let's see. I've got my pump. I've got installation for 3 hours. 3 hours. All right, good. So now we have our save and close. Okay. So now we've got our estimate. And now we're going to go back to the exercise we're supposed to be covering today, which is this one, which is creating a partial invoice from the drawer. Okay, we're starting in the sample company. Here's the scenario. Billable Photography has decided to go ahead with their outdoor background. They have agreed to pay half the cost now, and then the other half when the job is complete. It's now time to send out the first invoice. Okay, so since you're going to be sending 2 invoices for one estimate, start by turning on Progress Invoicing in the Sales tab of Account and Settings. Okay, now we don't actually have to do this because I can show you for the purposes of today, we can just create the invoice. Well, let me go ahead and just, I don't want to confuse you. So let's just do it exactly the way the exercise says. Okay. All right. So we're going to go to Sales and Account and Settings. Account and Settings. And then the Sales tab. And we're going to go down to the Progress Invoicing section. Okay. Right here. You guys see? Yep. Okay. We're going to click that. We're going to turn it on. In the sample company, we have to say yes to update our template. We're going to say save. And we're going to click done. All right. And somebody is giving John some instructions on how to find the previous live streams in the group. So thank you for that, whoever that is. All right. All right. So here we have set it up in Account and Settings. So now we're going to go to steps 2 and 3. What the heck is going on here? All right. We're going to create an invoice for Billable Photography. Okay. Billable Photography. Okay. And boom, here it is. Popping up in the drawer. This is our whole focus today, is talking about what pops up in the drawer. And so here's another example of something that pops up in the drawer. Now, I actually didn't have to turn on Progress Invoicing. That's only going to, but that's the exercise that I have. So we're going to hit Add. And because I turned on Progress Invoicing, then I can either put all of the information from the estimate onto the invoice, or I can do part of it. So I can say either a percentage of it, or I can say specifically for each line how much I'm invoicing. In this exercise, we are doing 50%, okay, because Craig wanted 50% upfront. So we would select 50%, and then click Copy to Invoice. Okay, so that is the exercise I have for doing it from the drawer, but that pop-up drawer. But if you just had an estimate and you started by creating the invoice and there was an estimate out there, it would just pop up and it would say, hey, do you want to add this to the drawer also? Okay, so that is the next thing. So we've talked about delay charges, billable expenses, billable time, estimates. Those are all money in transactions. Let me pop up. I always forget to do this. Hold on. Because when I'm talking to you, I'm so tiny. Okay, wait. Hello. All right, here we go. All right. So we've talked about all of the money in transactions where things might pop up. So we have our delayed charges, we have our billable time, billable expenses, and we have estimates. So those are all money in. Well, we also have some things that can pop up for money out transactions. Now, we saw briefly what that looks like with a purchase order. Let me show you that again. Unless did I already add the purchase order? I may have added the purchase order and then messed myself up. So if I go to expenses, and so how do you like this new left nav bar? Okay, so I've said this on a couple of live streams, but Intuit is in the process of changing this, how we navigate on the left-hand side. And they're doing this to save us time. And there's kind of some cool things. So you can bookmark things that you go to all the time. And the idea is that it saves you space and is more customizable for exactly how you do it. But it's not completely rolled out yet. And sometimes when you go into the sample company, you get this left navigation bar. And other times you get the one that we're used to. So as soon as they have fully rolled it out, and as soon as this is the standard, I will create a video about this left navigation bar and show you how to use it. And I will also update the exercises so that the beginning part is correct. But for now, it's sometimes there and it's sometimes not. So I don't know what to tell you. All right, so let's go to our vendors here and see if we have any. No, we don't have any purchase orders, but you guys saw me do that previously. If there's a purchase order out there, then that will pop up in the drawer. The other thing that will pop up in the drawer is a vendor credit. So a vendor credit is, again, let me pop myself up here. Okay. A vendor credit is, let's say you purchase something. So we purchase something from Tim Phillip, let's say, and it's broken or there's something wrong with it or whatever. And Tim says, "Oh, hey, no problem. I'll give you credit for that so you don't have to pay for it. Or next time you'll get $100 off your bill," or something like that. When we do that for our customers, okay, so Amy's Bird Sanctuary, we sell her something and it doesn't work or whatever, and we give her credit, that's called a credit memo. But if somebody gives us credit, okay, so Tim Phillips Masonry or Norton Building Supplies or whatever, somebody gives us credit, that's called a vendor credit. Okay, so let's take a look at that. So here is our exercise, create and apply vendor credit, which Joel has put in the chat. Thank you. Okay, so here's our scenario. Craig purchased 10 rock fountains from Tim Phillip Masonry and has received but not yet paid the bill. One of the fountains, however, was cracked. When Craig contacted him about the cracked fountain, Tim agreed to deduct the cost of one of the fountains from his current bill. Create Tim's bill, then create a vendor credit and apply it to the bill. Okay, so we're going to deviate from this exercise just a little bit so that you can see it pop up in the drawer. Okay, so we're going to first hit plus new and create the bill. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. So much clutter. Okay, so we're going to click plus new. Then we're going to select right here vendor credit. No, I'm sorry. We have to create the bill first. I got off track. Plus new, create the bill. Okay, going back to our exercise. Okay, enter Tim Phillip Masonry as the vendor. Notice that a purchase order appears in the drawer to the right. This is the previously agreed upon price for the fountains. We already added the purchase order previously, so we're going to have to add them manually. Okay, so change the quantity to 10. Remember, this is the original bill. Then click the arrow in the green button to select Save and Close. Okay, so we're going to do Tim Philip Masonry. Okay, and what I mean by this is the original bill is that this is, we purchased that, we got 10 rock fountains and one of them was broken, right? So this is the one, the first bill. Okay, so we've got rock fountains. Oops. Oh, we don't want it to be a category. We want it to be an items detail right here. Okay. I do not have time today to explain the difference between the category details and the item details. But if you are not clear on this, certainly if you are in the gym, make sure that you do those exercises because that will help you understand the difference between those two. All right, so we've got our rock fountains. We've got 10 that we purchased. Okay. Oops, not 110. My goodness, that's a lot. 10 rock fountains. There we go. And let's see. So we've got 10 rock fountains, should be $12.50. Okay, going back to the bill. So we're going to click Save, click the green arrow button. We're not scheduling the payment right now. We're going to click Save and Close. Okay, so now the bill is out there. Now we have to create the vendor credit that we're going to apply to the bill. Okay, so I'm going to go to step 4. Now let's create the vendor credit that Tim promised. We're going to hit plus new and select vendor credit. Plus new, select vendor credit. Tim Philip. Okay. And then what is he giving us credit for? Let's see, steps 5 and 7. Enter Tim Philip Masonry as the vendor. Click the arrow to open up item details, okay, and enter rock fountain. He's going to give us credit for that one rock fountain. Okay, so we're using item details. Rock fountain, there's the one credit. Okay. And now we're going to click Save and Close. Save and close. Okay. So let's go back to our exercise. Okay, click Save and Close. Now, in the exercise, we're using the Pay Bills screen to apply the vendor credit. Okay, but for today, because we're talking about pop-up boxes, let's see how we would see that pop-up box, okay? Because that vendor credit is out there. So if I create a new bill, for Tim Philip, oh my gosh, guys, okay, Tim Philip, it doesn't pop up. All right, let's see what happens when I create an expense. When I create an expense, Tim Philip, notice what happens. Okay, so when I do a bill, it doesn't pop up, but when I do an expense, it does pop up right here, and I can add it to what I'm paying right now. Or I could say, hey, this is the bill. Remember what an expense is? Let's just stop and talk about what an expense is here for a minute. Okay, so an expense is when you pay at the time of the sale. So if Craig goes to Home Depot, okay, and he buys some lumber at Home Depot, he's going to go to the cash register and he's going to pay for that lumber at the time of the sale, okay, at that moment. Just like you go to the grocery store and you buy something and you pay for it at the time of the sale, okay, that's an expense when it's money out. When it's money in, then that's a sales receipt. Okay, so that's the difference between a sales receipt and an expense. The expense is money out. The sales receipt is money in. Okay, so expense now, now we're saying, okay, we already paid Tim Phillip. Let's take a look at it again. We already paid Tim Phillip however much money, and we're documenting that. So we can say, oh, we paid this bill. Okay, we could add the bill. And then we could say, oh, and we also applied this vendor credit. And then we could complete this expense. Okay, see how this is checked? Okay, so the bill is here, the vendor credit is there. Okay, and so now the total, and then we can document how we paid that. All right, so, and the last thing I wanted to tell you is that the vendor credits will pop up like that. The credit memos will not. Okay, so you can't apply a credit memo from a drawer like that, at least not that I was able to find. I tried it many ways, and I was never able to get it to a credit memo to pop up like that on a received payment or on an invoice or anything like that. So the way that it works for credit memos is that it automatically just appears here. If this were a received payment, oh, you can't see what I'm looking at right here. So it shows up just like this. It shows up down at the bottom under credits, but you never see it actually pop up in the drawer. Okay, so what have we covered today? We have created, we've talked about delayed charges. We've talked about billable expenses, billable time. We've talked about estimates popping up, all of these things popping up in the drawer. We've talked about purchase orders popping up in the drawer and vendor credits popping up in the drawer, but not credit memos. All right. That's it. I covered all of the pop-ups, that I could think of. There might be some out there that I don't remember. If you have any questions, hopefully you will put them in the chat, but you guys are always really good about putting in your questions as they come up rather than waiting to the end, which is great. I know sometimes when you go to, like a live stream or whatever, they always say, save your questions to the end. And, sometimes I do that if I'm pretty sure that I'm going to cover, answer your questions later. But for these live streams, typically, I want you to be following along and actually doing it. So sometimes if you're not on the same page, you're seeing an error message or like whatever, then we'll stop and go over that for you. But I don't see any more questions in the chat. So thank you so much for your patience and sticking with us. And we are going to figure out these technical issues. I keep saying that, I am an expert in QuickBooks Online and the Pro Advisor certification test, and that's it. That's where my expertise ends. So all of this technical stuff is definitely a challenge. But anyway, that's it. You guys have a great week. Have a great weekend. And I can't wait to hear your success story.